Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Salem. And tonight we're going to continue our conversation of the relationship between justice and deity. And before we go any farther, I do want to point out that this is one of those subjects of which we have dealt with a number that really do not break down easily into 5-minute installments. Nonetheless, we will continue to try to wrestle with it within the format of the vlog. And I want to pick up tonight from a comment that was made from It's Ike Here. And I believe this comment is directly in relevance to the lion eating the lamb example that I gave in last night's vlog. And It's Ike Here asks whether this is just or just the way things are. And I think that this speaks to a fundamental difference between the attitude of modern Western paganism and certain other points of view. And in particular, I think it speaks to a difference in the attitude of modern Western paganism versus modern Western Christianity. And this has to do with how we look at nature. In modern Western paganism, most of us would acknowledge the maxim of Hermes Trismegistus, which comes from the Emerald Tablet, namely, as above, so below. This is the idea that if you want to understand the Creator, you can look at the creation. That everything in the created world reflects its divine origin. And if you want to understand divinity, you can look around you and it will be reflected to you. This is the basis of a lot of our ideas of divination, a lot of our ideas of symbolism, a lot of our ideas of magic. Now, when we speak of nature, therefore, we as pagans tend to make the assumption that nature is as nature is meant to be. That nature is not broken, that nature is not aberrant, that nature is not evil. Now, there are certain other religions that believe nature is all those things, but our attitude has always tended to be that nature is where you can most readily see what deity intends for the world, because it is the one place where existence is as it was created rather than as we as humans have shaped it. Although certainly we have influenced nature. But there are certain aspects of it that we know perfectly well we did not influence because they predate us and we see them through every part of our own history. And one of them is that the lion eats the lamb. There was never a time that we know of when it was ever otherwise. Now, that doesn't mean that the lamb likes it. But it does seem to be how deity has set it up. Now, why has deity set it up that way? There are many ideas, and we have to say in the end that we don't necessarily understand the mind of deity. I've often compared humans trying to understand the mind of deity to a creature like a hamster trying to understand a human. The ability of our mind to conceptualize deity is rather limited. However, having said that, some of the ideas that are commonly given for why the lion would eat the lamb include things such as the particular lambs that the lion is likely to end up eating are the ones that are a little slower, a little dumber, maybe a little sicker than the other lambs, and therefore by eating them, the rest of the lambs tend to improve their stock. By eating a certain number of lambs, the lions make it more possible for the herd of lambs in general to thrive because they will not outrace their food supply nearly so quickly, whereas if they're not occasionally eaten, they may tend to outnumber the very things they need to eat and end up starving. And you see this sometimes in nature where a critical predator has been removed or circumstances have changed and a species that has normally been kept in check suddenly multiplies beyond its means and ends up falling on very hard times because the resources are not there to support it. And this all comes down to the idea that nature is a very intricate balance, and that there is a lion to eat the lamb is part of the balance, that there's a hawk to eat the mouse, that there is a bear to eat the occasional person, that there are various different ways of keeping different species in check. Now you might say that as humans we no longer have any major predators, though certainly one does occasionally hear about one animal or another killing a person. It's very rare. However, it's not as rare as you might think, because although as humans we are one of the dominant species on the planet, as we love to say, we're not the only one. One that is very powerful on the planet that you may not have thought of is the virus, which is a living thing. And it is probably, I would say, our major predator at this point, because it takes out a lot of us every year. And certainly, as individuals, we don't like this. But you know, there are an awful lot of us. And if some of us didn't occasionally die, we'd be in really hard places. In fact, even as we are in some parts of the world, we're in hard places, though I personally believe that the world could support a lot more people if it's only managed effectively. But as it is, you see places where people live in terrible poverty and hunger because they have outpaced their resources. And you see this also again with certain animals. This is one of the reasons why when deity created nature, deity, the deity is however you want to say it, that balance of predator and prey was put in as part of it to keep everything in check, to keep everything in balance. So when you ask me if the lion eating the lamb is just or just the way things are, I would say both. I would say that it's extremely important to the balance of nature. And the idea that some religions have, that the lion and the lamb are really supposed to be friends, and the fact that they're not is because nature is broken, really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Now, I will always remember and never forget a television show I saw maybe 10, maybe 15 years ago. It was the Bill Maher show, and his guest that evening included the then president of PETA. And she very proudly announced that she had made her cat a vegetarian, and that the cat loved to eat broccoli and so forth, and most of the panel that evening on the show were rather aghast at the idea of making a cat, which is naturally a carnivore, into a vegetarian. And the lady pointed out that she gave her cat lots of vitamin supplements so that it would be healthy. But, you know, what I would have to say to this is, yes, you can make your cat a vegetarian, but it's not the natural state of the cat, and it needs those chemical supplements in order to maintain that lifestyle. But put it back in nature, it cannot live that way. And when we look at the lion and the lamb, if the lion isn't eating the lamb is in a world of hurt, because it cannot really eat broccoli. Maybe a little bit, but that's not its natural diet. So it really kind of comes down to, in part, as we look at the question of the lion and the lamb, do we believe that God is reflected in nature? I have always been taught that. I have always believed it. So to me, yes, the lion is supposed to eat the lamb. Now, when we look at the world, and when we look at things that are perhaps a little more complex, such as what's going on now in Japan and the Pacific with the earthquakes and the tsunamis, and I understand now a volcano, we might say to ourselves, you know, is this just? Is this divine justice? And what I would have to say, I think we complicate matters by trying to use the word justice, which I think really only has application to our social contracts between one another, and might better say balance. But yes, I believe there must be a reason, or it would not happen. I would not go so far as to presume to know what the reasons are. I could speculate. I could say it might have to do with karma. I could say that it may have to do with lessons that souls need to learn, but I'm only speculating. But I do believe that there would have to be a reason in the balance of nature, in the balance of the universe, and that ultimately my belief is, and has always been, that the universe is perfectly balanced. It doesn't always seem that way to us, because we only see it from inside and from a very particular point of view. But I think that ultimately it's a very fine and delicate balance, and that it is basically where deity wants it to be at any given moment. Now, does this mean that it's not also in a constant state of change and flux? Well, obviously it's in a constant state of change and flux. Does it mean that we should not try to make the world better? Well, obviously we should try to make the world better. However, it is kind of important to remember that what we think is better at this moment isn't always right. Because do remember that only 100 and some years ago, all those smokestacks belching smoke and coal into the sky were considered a wonderful, wonderful thing, and all those strip mines pulling the minerals out of the earth were considered a wonderful, wonderful thing. And what people thought they were doing to improve the world, 100 and some years later, doesn't always seem to have been necessarily a great idea. And we need to remember that our ideas now may not turn out in 100 years looking back to have been the best ideas. And when we start getting the idea that we know better than nature, I don't think it's always wise to take that point of view. I do believe that it's very important for us to try to build a better world and try to be better people. However, I do think that we must always bear in mind that deity does not necessarily have the same viewpoint that we do. So, anyway, those are my thoughts for tonight. I hope that you find them interesting, and until next time, may you blessed be. But wait, don't forget our books, Witch School First, Second, and Third Degree, and also Living the Wiccan Life, and Ritual in Theory and Practice, available at a bookstore near you, or get them direct from us at www.witchschoolstore.com.